The thin atmosphere of Ethelgard's Vale clung to the sanctuary dome like a shroud of spun glass, refracting the weak light of its distant primary star into hues of pale lavender and rose. Outside, the wind, a perpetual, sighing presence across the moon's desolate plains, sculpted dunes of gray regolith and polished ancient, skeletal rock formations until they gleamed with a faint, internal luminescence. Inside, however, life persisted. Tenacious and precious, Ranger Kaela, her sleek, russet fur, catching the soft glow of the habitat's internal lighting, moved with the fluid grace inherent to her Chthon species. Her large pointed ears swiveled constantly, attuned to the subtle symphony of the sanctuary, a place she considered both her charge and her prison. For 6 cycles, this remote installation, perched precariously on the edge of explored space, had been her entire world, dedicated to a singular, almost sacred purpose, the preservation of the Lunari stalkers. Once, the stalkers had been the apex predators of a vibrant world lost to ecological collapse generations ago. Magnificent creatures of sinew and shadow, possessed of an intelligence that bordered on the unsettling. Now, they existed only here, 8 fragile lives clinging to existence, represented by cubs born not of nature, but of painstaking artificial insemination and genomic reconstruction. They were the last flickering embers of a species extinguished in the wild, genetic ghosts coaxed back into fragile reality. Kaela knew each cub intimately. There was Cinder, bold and perpetually curious, his shadow-gray fur already showing the dappled pattern of his ancestors. Whisper, aptly named for her unnerving silence and ability to appear seemingly from nowhere. Boulder, the largest, already displaying a protective instinct towards his siblings. And Rosie, small and delicate, perhaps the most genetically precarious, the one who always seemed to demand an extra measure of Kaela's vigilance. The remaining 4, equally distinct, tumbled and played within the carefully controlled environment, a sprawling enclosure designed to mimic their lost homeworld, complete with rocky outcrops, simulated nocturnal forests, and temperature-controlled caves. Kaela watched them now from the observation platform, her sensitive nostrils flaring slightly, tasting the recycled air, her keen eyes missing nothing. A low hum emanated from the environmental controls, a constant reassurance of stability. The cubs wrestled, their playful growls and yips echoing softly in the cavernous space. A pang of profound tenderness, mixed with an ever-present anxiety, tightened her chest. Their existence was a miracle, a testament to Chthon dedication and technology, but it was a miracle balanced on a knife's edge. Every breath they took felt like a victory against the encroaching void of extinction. The weight of her responsibility was immense, a mantle woven from hope and fear. The Chthon had long revered the intricate tapestry of life, and the loss of any species was felt as a deep, collective wound. To be the guardian of the absolute last of the Lunari was an honor burdened with the terrifying possibility of ultimate failure. The evening cycle was deepening, the internal lights dimming to simulate the twilight of the stalker's native world. Kaela ran a final diagnostic check on the habitat's integrity systems, all green, secure. She allowed herself a small sigh, the tension easing slightly from her shoulders. Perhaps tonight, sleep would come easily. She turned from the main viewport, her sharp claws clicking softly on the metallic floor, heading towards her modest living quarters adjacent to the main control center. A flicker of movement, anomalous and unexpected, registered on a secondary perimeter sensor feed displayed on a wall-mounted screen. Kaela froze, her ears instantly flattening against her skull, every nerve suddenly taut. It wasn't one of the automated maintenance drones. It wasn't atmospheric interference. The signature was biological, faint, but undeniably present, just outside the tertiary fence line. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Breaches were statistically improbable, almost impossible, given the sanctuary's remote location and layered defenses. Pirates avoided this sector, known for its navigational hazards and lack of valuable resources. Corporate prospectors had long since written off Ethelgard's veil. Who or what could be out there? She moved swiftly to the main console, her paws flying across the holographic interface, amplifying the sensor gain. The signal was clearer now, moving stealthily, deliberately, towards the habitat's primary ventilation intake, a known, albeit heavily fortified, potential vulnerability. This was no random encounter. This was targeted. An alarm, low and insistent at first, began to pulse through the station, a silent alert Kaela had configured, designed not to startle the cubs. Red light bathed the control room in an emergency glow. "Seal main habitat," Kaela commanded, her voice tight. Heavy blast doors slid shut with a pneumatic hiss, isolating the cub's enclosure. "Activate external countermeasures." Defensive grid alpha. The low hum of the sanctuary deepened as power surged to the outer perimeter defenses, energy fields shimmering into existence around the dome. But the intruder was already past the tertiary fence, moving with unnatural speed. Kaela watched the tactical display, her mind racing. The intruder bypassed the standard sonic deterrents and motion sensors as if they weren't there, suggesting sophisticated countermeasures. They reached the ventilation shaft access panel. A brief flare of energy registered, a cutting tool, precise and efficient. Access granted. Dread. Cold and heavy settled in Kaela's stomach. They weren't trying to get into the habitat physically. They were targeting the air supply. "Isolate ventilation system section 7, she ordered, trying to seal off the compromised area. But the system response lagged. A new alert flashed. Airborne contaminant detected. Nanoparticles. Unidentified synthetic signature. It was dispersing rapidly through the ducts leading directly towards the cub's environmental recirculation unit. A pathogen, engineered, released deliberately. Kaela felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a breach, it was an attack. An act of biological warfare aimed directly at the last hopes of a dying species. Her worst fears, the ones that whispered in the darkest hours of the long lunar nights, had just materialized. This was no accident. This was extermination. She scrambled to activate the habitat's emergency air scrubbers and biofilters, diverting auxiliary power, but knew it might already be too late. The pathogen was designed to be insidious, fast-acting. She could only watch the monitors, helpless, as the contaminant readings spiked within the sealed enclosure. Below, the cubs, sensing the subtle shift in air pressure, or perhaps the change in Kaela's own scent profile, transmitted through the vents, stirred uneasily, low growls rumbling in their chests. The attack was silent, invisible, and utterly terrifying. Kaela gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white beneath her fur. Who would do this? Why? The Lunari stalkers posed no threat, held no economic value beyond the purely scientific and symbolic, unless their unique genetics held some hidden potential, some key that a ruthless entity might covet or wish to eradicate. The chilling thought sent a fresh wave of fear through her. The sanctuary, once a place of hope, now felt like a trap, and the precious lives within it were exposed, vulnerable, despite all her efforts. The long night on Ethelgard's Vale had just begun, and darkness had descended in more ways than one. Days bled into weeks under the sanctuary's artificial sky, each rotation marked by mounting fear and dwindling hope. The pathogen, insidious and brilliantly designed, was proving resistant to standard Kithan decontamination protocols. It wasn't a simple virus or bacterium. It was a complex synthetic nanomachine programmed to target specific Lunari genetic markers, subtly degrading cellular function. A slow, creeping death sentence delivered through the very air the cubs breathed. Kaela worked tirelessly, collaborating remotely with Kithan xenobiologists, running simulations, attempting to synthesize countermeasures. But the pathogen adapted, shifting its attack vector each time they neared a solution. It was like fighting smoke. The cubs grew lethargic. Their playful energy waned, replaced by listlessness. Cinder's bold explorations ceased. He spent most of his time curled in a shadowed alcove. Whisper remained unnervingly still, her camouflage like fur blending almost perfectly with the rocks, making her difficult to track even with internal sensors. Boulder's protective instincts seemed dulled by a growing malaise. But it was Rosie who showed the most alarming decline, always the smallest, the most fragile. Her breathing became shallow, her coat lost its healthy sheen, and she refused nourishment. Turning away even from the nutrient paste, Kaela prepared with painstaking care. Seeing Rosie weaken was like watching the last candle flicker in a vast darkness. Kaela felt a desperation bordering on panic clawing at her composure. She had failed them, her sanctuary, her vigilance. It hadn't been enough. It was during a bleak status update call with the Galactic Conservation Council headquarters that the name was first mentioned, Prefect Lior, a stern but respected Taldorian official whose holographic image shimmered before Kaela, spoke with grave urgency. Ranger Kaela, we understand the criticality of the situation. Our best xenobiologists concur with your assessment. The pathogen is synthetic, highly advanced, likely corporate or military grade. Standard countermeasures are ineffective. Lior paused, his multifaceted eyes seeming to regard her with a measure of sympathy. We believe there is only one individual outside of classified governmental labs with the expertise, and perhaps the necessary, unconventional approach to potentially synthesize an antidote. Kaela's ears flicked forward. Who? A human, Lior stated, the word hanging in the air. Dr. Jack Arden. Kaela recoiled as if struck. Arden, the geneticist. Absolutely not. Her voice was sharp, laced with the deep-seated distrust her species held towards humans. A distrust born from a long history of Terran expansionism, resource exploitation, and the casual ecological devastation often left in their wake. Many extinct species across the galaxy lay, directly or indirectly, at humanity's feet. And Arden himself, his reputation was notorious. Brilliant. Yes, undeniably so. His work in saving the Arcturian ice foxes and the sentient flora of Xantus Prime was legendary. But he was also known for pushing ethical boundaries, for utilizing radical, often unsanctioned, genetic modification techniques. Rumors persisted of unauthorized experiments, of projects shut down by interstellar ethics committees. He was a pariah in many scientific circles, a maverick tolerated only for his results. His methods are reckless, Prefect. The potential for unforeseen consequences is outweighed by the certainty of extinction if we do nothing. Lior interrupted firmly. Arden has achieved impossible results. He specializes in complex genetic rescue operations, often involving synthetic biological threats. His past controversies are noted, but his success rate in saving endangered species is unparalleled. He has access to proprietary technologies and databases unavailable to us. Humans were likely responsible for the Lunari's initial decline, Kaela countered. her fur bristling slightly. Bringing one here now feels like a betrayal. This is not about blame, our ranger. Lior's voice softened slightly. This is about survival. The Lunari have no political or economic faction advocating for them but us. Arden has agreed to consult. On the Council's urgent request, he is already en route. He understands the sensitivity, the need for discretion. Kaela felt trapped. To refuse Arden's help was to condemn the cubs. To accept it felt like inviting the fox into the henhouse, entrusting the galaxy's most precious genetic heritage to a species known for breaking things and a man known for breaking rules. She looked at the biomonitor feed displaying Rosie's fading vital signs. The cub's shallow breaths were barely visible. The choice, agonizing as it was no choice at all. "Very well, Prefect," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Inform Dr. Arden. He will be granted access, but he will be under my direct supervision at all times." Understood. Ranger, we are transmitting all your data logs and the pathogen analysis to him now. He arrives in approximately 20 standard hours. May the stars favor his efforts. The hologram flickered out, leaving Kaela alone in the silent control room, the weight of her decision settling upon her. A human was coming, a human whose reputation preceded him, trailing shadows of ethical ambiguity. He held the potential cure, the only hope. But Kaela couldn't shake the deep-seated fear that his arrival might merely herald a different kind of disaster. The enemy was already inside the gates, circulating in the very air. Now, a potential, unpredictable new variable was about to walk through the door. The airlock hissed open, cycling through decontamination protocols before revealing the figure standing within. Dr. Jack Arden was unexpectedly ordinary, of average human height, with short, slightly disordered brown hair, intelligent gray eyes behind functional spectacles, and lines of weariness etched around his mouth and eyes that suggested long hours and little sleep. He wore practical, travel-worn clothing, not the pristine lab coat Kaela might have imagined, and carried a single, heavy-looking case made of some dark, non-reflective alloy. He stepped into the sanctuary's reception area, his gaze sweeping over the Kithan Ranger, taking in her alert posture, the tension in the set of her vulpine features. "Ranger Kaela," he said, his voice calm, professional, betraying no hint of the controversy surrounding him. "Dr. Arden, thank you for expediting my arrival." Kaela inclined her head stiffly, her ears flat. "Doctor, welcome to Ethelgard's Vale. Your access is provisional and restricted. You will follow my protocols without deviation." Her tone was cold, leaving no room for pleasantries. Jack merely nodded, seemingly unfazed by her hostility. "Understood. Ranger, my only concern is the subjects. Prefect Lior provided your preliminary data. The pathogen is sophisticated, impressive, in a terrifying way. May I see the habitat and the cubs? Time is critical." There was an undeniable urgency in his voice that resonated with Kaela's own desperation. She hesitated for only a moment, then gestured towards the transit corridor leading to the main observation level. This way, they walked in silence, the only sound their footsteps echoing in the sterile passageway. Kaela kept a wary distance, her senses on high alert, analyzing his scent, his micro-expressions, searching for any sign of insincerity or hidden motive. Jack, for his part, seemed entirely focused, his eyes scanning the sanctuary's internal architecture, the readouts on wall panels, absorbing information. When they reached the observation platform overlooking the sprawling enclosure, Jack stopped, his gaze fixed on the 8 small forms scattered within. Even from this distance, their lethargy was apparent. Rosie lay curled near a heat emitter, barely moving. Jack's professional demeanor softened slightly, a flicker of something like empathy crossing his face. Magnificent creatures, he murmured, almost to himself, even diminished. To lose them. He trailed off, then turned back to Kaela. I need a sample of the raw pathogen. If you were able to isolate any from the ventilation system, and immediate access to the cub's current biotelemetry and genetic profiles. I brought a portable genomic sequencer and a biosynthesizer. With luck, I can begin analyzing the pathogen's structure and testing potential counteragents within the hour. Kaela led him to the sanctuary's laboratory, a sterile environment equipped with advanced Cathan analytical equipment. She observed him closely as he unpacked his case, revealing compact, powerful devices that hummed softly to life. He worked with a focused intensity that was almost hypnotic, his movements precise, economical. He interfaced his equipment with the sanctuary's systems, data streams flowing across holographic displays he conjured in the air. Despite her deep-seated reservations, Kaela couldn't deny his expertise. He navigated the complex Lunari genome with an ease that spoke of profound understanding, cross-referencing it with the partial sequences of the pathogen she had managed to isolate. The pathogen binds to mitochondrial RNA precursors, Jack explained, pointing to a complex molecular diagram shimmering in the air, specifically targeting sequences unique to the Lunari Y chromosome lineage, but with secondary vectors that affect all subjects. It disrupts energy production at the cellular level, explains the lethargy, the systemic decline. It's designed for attrition, not immediate kill. Clever, cruel, he frowned, inputting rapid commands. It's also exhibiting adaptive mutation. Your countermeasures likely prompted it to shift its binding sites. We need something dynamic, something that can adapt as quickly as it does. Hours melted away. Kaela found herself drawn into the frantic pace of the work, providing Jack with tissue samples carefully extracted from the cubs, monitoring their vitals, offering insights based on her intimate knowledge of their physiology and behavior. A grudging respect began to form beneath her distrust. Jack wasn't reckless. He was thorough, methodical, exploring every conventional avenue first. He exhausted the databases of known antiviral and anti-nanite agents, running countless simulations. None offered more than temporary, partial suppression. Then, Rosie took a turn for the worse. Her breathing became ragged, her internal temperature plummeting. Alarms shrilled softly on the biomonitor. Kaela rushed to the cub's side within the habitat, Jack observing grimly from the lab's interface. She's crashing, doctor, Kaela reported, her voice strained. Standard metabolic stimulants are having no effect. Jack's face was grim. The cellular degradation is accelerating. Conventional treatments won't work fast enough, if at all. Ranger. There is another option, highly experimental. It involves using retroviral vectors to introduce modified genetic sequences, designed to actively counteract the pathogen's binding mechanism and repair the mitochondrial damage. Kaela's fur stood on end. Genetic modification. That's what your reputation is built on, isn't it? Unsanctioned gene editing. Jack met her gaze directly, his gray eyes unwavering. My reputation is built on saving species others had written off. Ranger. Yes. The techniques are controversial. They carry risks. But the alternative here is certain death. Starting with Rosie. The sequences I propose are derived from extremophile organisms known for robust mitochondrial function, adapted and synthesized to be compatible with the Lunari genome. With one addition, a small segment of synthesized human mitochondrial DNA, human DNA, Kaela felt a fresh wave of revulsion and suspicion. Why? Resilience. Jack stated simply, human mitochondria, while prone to their own issues, possess certain adaptive repair mechanisms and energy efficiencies that are remarkably robust, synthetically replicating and integrating a specific, isolated functional sequence could provide the boost Rosie needs to fight this thing off. It's a stabilizing agent, designed to work synergistically with the extremophile sequences. It's our best chance, perhaps our only chance. Kaela looked from Jack's earnest, intense face to the monitor showing Rosie's fading life signs. The cub let out a tiny, distressed whimper. Distrust warred with desperation. She hated the idea, hated the thought of introducing human material into the pristine Lunari code, hated relying on this controversial human scientist. But Rosie was dying. The lives of the other 7 hung precariously in the balance. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, the weight of the decision crushing her. "Do it," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "Save her, doctor. Whatever it takes." Jack nodded, his expression becoming one of intense concentration as he turned back to his synthesizer, initiating the complex sequence construction. Kaela watched, her heart pounding, praying she hadn't just made a fatal mistake, praying that this human stranger, this genetic gambit, was truly the cure and not just another path to extinction. The fate of the Lunari stalkers now rested not just on science, but on a desperate act of interspecies trust she never thought she'd be capable of. The procedure was delicate, fraught with tension. Jack, guided by Kaela's precise instructions on Lunari vascular systems, administered the synthesized retroviral vector intravenously to the fading Rosie. They watched the monitors with bated breath, tracking every minute fluctuation in the cub's vital signs. For what felt like an eternity, nothing changed. Rosie remained frighteningly still, her life hanging by the slenderest thread. Kaela felt a cold despair begin to creep back in. Had they been too late? Had the radical treatment failed, or worse, accelerated the decline? Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the numbers began to shift. Rosie's core temperature stabilized, then began a slow climb back towards the normal range. Her shallow breaths deepened, becoming more regular. The alarming arrhythmias on the heart monitor smoothed out. A faint, tentative flicker of energy seemed to return to the small form. Jack let out a long, slow breath, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "Mitochondrial function is improving," he reported, his voice tight with relief. "Cellular respiration rates are climbing. The counteragent appears to be integrating, disrupting the pathogen's binding." Kaela didn't dare speak, didn't dare break the fragile spell of hope. She simply watched, her entire being focused on the small cub. Hours later, Rosie stirred. She lifted her head weakly, blinked her dark eyes, and let out a soft, questioning chirp. Kaela knelt beside her, offering a small amount of nutrient paste on her fingertip. Hesitantly, Rosie licked it off. It was the first nourishment she had accepted in days. A wave of overwhelming relief washed over Kaela, so potent it almost brought her to her knees. Tears she hadn't realized she was holding back pricked at the corners of her eyes. "She's responding," Kaela whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's working." Jack gave a tired, small smile. It seems so. 1 down, 7 to go. Over the following days, Jack meticulously synthesized and administered tailored versions of the treatment to the remaining 7 cubs. Each administration was followed by hours of anxious monitoring, but the results were consistent. One by one, the cubs began to rally. Cinder rediscovered his curiosity, cautiously exploring the enclosure again. Whisper became more active, her silent movements regaining their purposeful stealth. Boulder resumed his role as the watchful protector, nudging his siblings gently. The pall of lethargy lifted from the habitat, replaced by a slowly returning vibrancy. The shared crisis, the intense collaboration, and the undeniable success of Jack's intervention began to erode the wall of distrust Kaela had erected. She observed him constantly, not just as a scientist, but as an individual. She saw the genuine dedication in his eyes as he monitored the cubs, the meticulous care he took with every procedure, the quiet satisfaction he derived, not from proving his controversial methods right, but from seeing life prevail. He rarely spoke of his past, but she sensed a weight there, a desire perhaps to atone for past mistakes or controversies by pouring all his energy into these critical rescues. He respected her authority within the sanctuary, deferred to her knowledge of the Lunari, and treated her as an equal partner in their desperate endeavor. Slowly, cautiously, Kaela began to soften. The harsh Kithan prejudice against humans, ingrained since her youth, began to feel less absolute when faced with the reality of Jack Arden. They started talking during the long hours of monitoring, conversations that drifted from the immediate crisis to broader topics: the ethics of genetic intervention, the role of sanctuaries in a galaxy scarred by extinction, the philosophical differences and surprising similarities between Kithan reverence for natural life and human scientific ambition. Jack listened intently to her perspectives, sharing his own with a candor that chipped away at her remaining suspicions. "I understand your species' reservations about humanity, Ranger," Jack said one cycle, as they watched Cinder and Boulder engage in a clumsy wrestling match. "We haven't always been wise stewards. Our history is littered with ecological failures and short-sighted expansion. My own work has sometimes blurred lines that many believe shouldn't be crossed." He adjusted his spectacles, his gaze distant for a moment. "But I believe the potential of science, used responsibly, ethically, is to mend what's been broken, to give species like the Lunari a fighting chance they wouldn't otherwise have. That's what drives me. Not hubris, I hope, but a responsibility to use the knowledge we've gained." Kaela considered his words. "Responsibility is a heavy burden. Doctor, ensuring the cure is not worse than the disease requires wisdom, not just knowledge." "I agree," Jack replied quietly, "and wisdom often requires collaboration, different perspectives, like yours." A fragile bridge of understanding was forming between them, built plank by plank with shared purpose and nascent respect. Kaela found herself appreciating Jack's dry wit, his unwavering focus, even the quiet intensity that had initially unnerved her. He, in turn, seemed to value her deep connection to the cubs, her intuitive understanding of their needs, and her fierce protective instincts. The professional boundary remained, but the animosity had evaporated, replaced by a tentative camaraderie born in the crucible of crisis. They were no longer just Kithan Ranger and human scientist. They were two individuals united by a common goal, fighting side by side for the survival of 8 precious lives. The sanctuary, once a place of solitary duty for Kaela, now held a shared vigil, illuminated by the faint but growing light of success. The period of cautious optimism proved short-lived, just as the cubs seemed fully recovered, regaining their strength and exhibiting playful behaviors Kaela hadn't seen since before the attack. The sanctuary's biomonitors flashed a new series of alerts. Analysis of routine atmospheric samples from within the habitat revealed startling data. The synthetic pathogen was still present, albeit in lower concentrations, and it was changing. Jack's face tightened as he studied the complex sequencing data flowing across the holographic display. "It's mutating again," he stated grimly. confirming Kaela's sudden fear. The retroviral counteragent forced it into an adaptive bottleneck. It's developing resistance to the specific mitochondrial repair sequences we introduced. Kaela felt a chill despite the controlled climate of the lab. Can you modify the treatment? Create a new counteragent. Jack ran simulations, his fingers flying across the interface. The results were discouraging. The mutation rate is accelerating exponentially. It's adapting faster than we can synthesize targeted countermeasures. Each new variant requires a unique sequence, and by the time we could deploy it, the pathogen would likely have shifted again. It's learning, anticipating. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, the lines of fatigue deepening around his eyes. We're essentially back to where we started. Only the enemy is smarter now. The Cubs' initial recovery bought us time, but the underlying threat remains, and it's evolving. Despair threatened to engulf Kaela once more. They had come so close, only to have victory snatched away by the relentless ingenuity of their unseen foe. She looked towards the habitat, where the Cubs, unaware of the renewed danger, chased each other through the simulated undergrowth. The thought of them succumbing after this brief reprieve was unbearable. There must be something else, Doctor, she pleaded, turning back to Jack. Some other approach. Jack was silent for a long moment, staring intently at the swirling patterns of the Lunari genetic code intertwined with the hostile sequences of the pathogen. His expression was distant, calculating, as if exploring territories far beyond conventional science. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, hesitant, yet charged with a strange intensity. There might be one possibility. Ranger, it's radical. More radical than anything I've attempted before. Highly theoretical and extremely dangerous, primarily to me. Kaela's ears perked. Tell me. The pathogen adapts because it's facing static, predictable countermeasures. Jack began, turning to face her fully. What if the countermeasure wasn't static? What if it could adapt in real time, evolving alongside the pathogen, anticipating its mutations, neutralizing them as they arise? How is that possible? By creating a living, adaptive source for the counteragent. Jack said slowly, by genetically bonding myself to the Cubs. Kaela stared at him, momentarily speechless. Bonding yourself. Genetically. What does that even mean? It means, Jack explained, his gaze steady despite the outlandish nature of his proposal, using a modified version of the retroviral vector technology, but this time, targeting my own cells. I would integrate key elements of the Lunari immune system markers and the synthesized counteragents into my own genome. More significantly, I would establish a form of controlled, symbiotic bioresonance link with the Cubs at the quantum entanglement level, something my more classified research has touched upon. My body would become a living bioreactor, constantly analyzing the pathogen's presence within the Cubs via this link, and my modified immune system would generate adaptive neutralizing antibodies and targeted RNA sequences in response. These counteragents could then be periodically harvested from my bloodstream and administered to the Cubs. He took a deep breath. Essentially, I would become a permanent, living donor, genetically and symbiotically linked to them, providing a dynamic, ever-evolving shield against the pathogen. The sheer audacity of the proposal stunned Kaela. It bordered on science fiction, involving theoretical biophysics and genetic manipulations far beyond established protocols. Doctor, the risks. To you, integrating alien DNA, establishing a quantum link with another species. The biological and neurological feedback alone could be catastrophic. Rejection, cellular breakdown, neurological dissociation. You could die, or worse. The risks are substantial, Jack admitted quietly. Permanent physiological changes are certain. The precise long-term effects are unknown, because nothing exactly like this has ever been attempted. But my research suggests it's theoretically possible. And the alternative is watching the Lunari die, watching the pathogen win. He looked towards the habitat again, his expression resolute. I am willing to take that risk. Ranger, if you are willing to assist. The procedure requires stabilizing tech and biological interfaces that only this sanctuary possesses, and insights into Lunari physiology that only you have. I cannot do it alone. Kaela was torn. The scientist in her recoiled from the sheer recklessness. The Keithan in her felt a deep ethical unease about such profound biological manipulation, especially involving a human, altering himself so fundamentally. Yet, the guardian in her, the part that had bonded so fiercely with the 8 vulnerable lives in her care, saw the terrifying logic. A dynamic threat required a dynamic defense, and Jack, despite his controversial past, was offering the ultimate sacrifice, potentially his health, his future, his very identity for the sake of the Lunari. His earlier words about responsibility echoed in her mind. This was responsibility taken to an almost unimaginable extreme. She looked at Jack, truly seeing the depth of his commitment, the quiet courage beneath the scientific brilliance. Her distrust had long since faded, replaced by respect and a growing, unsettling warmth. Could she allow him to do this? Could she bear not to, if it was the only way? You are certain this is the only remaining option, based on the pathogen's current trajectory and adaptive speed. Yes, Jack affirmed. It's the only path I see that offers a chance of long-term survival for them. Kaela took a deep, steadying breath, the recycled air suddenly feeling thin. Her gaze met Jack's, a silent understanding passing between them. The fate of the Lunari, and perhaps Jack's own fate, rested on this single, desperate throw of the dice. All right, doctor, she said, her voice firm, despite the tremor of fear and uncertainty she felt deep inside. Prepare your equipment. Explain the procedure to me in detail. I will assist you. The bridge between them, forged in crisis, was about to be tested by an unprecedented leap into the unknown, a fusion of biology and sacrifice that would change everything. The procedure was unlike anything Kaela could have imagined, a surreal blend of advanced bioengineering, delicate neurointerfacing, and Keithan stabilizing technology. Jack lay strapped onto a specialized bio-support couch in the med bay adjacent to the lab. Monitors displaying his vital signs alongside complex energy field readings and genomic sequencing progress. Kaela moved around him, adjusting arcane Keithan devices designed to buffer catastrophic biological rejection and maintain cellular integrity during profound systemic shock. Technology rarely used outside of extreme medical emergencies on her homeworld. Jack, though conscious, was heavily sedated against the anticipated pain and physiological stress. He directed Kaela through the steps with a low, strained voice, guiding her calibration of the retroviral infusion system and the delicate placement of neurosynaptic relays designed to establish the bioresonance link with the cubs, who were resting peacefully in the main habitat, unaware of the extraordinary measures being taken on their behalf. Samples of their genetic material were integrated into the process, acting as the target keys for the quantum entanglement Jack theorized. Stabilize the biofield harmonics, Ranger, Jack instructed, his breathing shallow. Phase variance must remain below 0.001% during vector integration. Kaela adjusted the controls, her pause surprisingly steady despite the tremor she felt internally. Her Keithan physiology, with its heightened senses and fine motor control, made her uniquely suited for this task. Harmonics stabilized, proceeding with initial vector infusion sequence. She activated the system, watching nervously as the genetically modified retrovirus, carrying synthesized Lunari immune markers and segments of Jack's own radically altered DNA, began to flow into his system. Instantly, Jack's body reacted. He gasped, arching slightly against the restraints despite the sedatives. Alarms blared as his heart rate spiked. His temperature fluctuated wildly, and his neural activity surged into chaotic patterns. "Rejection cascade imminent," Kaela shouted, overriding the automated infusion cutoff, boosting biofield stabilizers, applying neurodampeners. She worked frantically, counteracting the violent biological storm erupting within him. Her Keithan medical training pushed to its absolute limit. This was far more intense than Jack's theoretical models had predicted. "Hold. Steady." Jack gritted out, sweat beading on his forehead. Body. Adapting. Link. Needs to. Establish. For hours, it was a battle. Kaela fought to keep Jack alive, managing cascades of systemic shock, cellular instability, and neurological overload, while simultaneously overseeing the slow, agonizing process of genetic integration and the tentative formation of the quantum link. She monitored the cub's telemetry constantly, looking for any sign of distress, any indication that the nascent connection was harming them. Thankfully, they remained stable, seemingly unaffected. The link, if forming, was subtle, operating on a level beyond gross physiological response. During the ordeal, the professional distance between Kaela and Jack dissolved completely. She wasn't just a ranger assisting a scientist, she was tending to him, her touch gentle as she wiped sweat from his brow, her voice calm and reassuring as she guided him through waves of pain and disorientation. She saw his vulnerability, his fear, but also his unwavering determination. He clung to consciousness, focusing his will on the process, on the connection he was trying to forge with the creatures he was trying to save. In those intense hours, working side by side against the potential for catastrophic failure, a bond deeper than camaraderie formed between them, and an intimacy born of shared risk and mutual reliance. Finally, after what felt like an entire lifetime compressed into a single extended cycle, the storm began to subside. Jack's vital signs stabilized, the chaotic energy readings smoothed out, and the genomic sequencer indicated successful, albeit partial, integration of the target sequences. The neuro interface showed a faint but stable resonance pattern, connecting Jack to the biosignatures of the 8 cubs. He lay exhausted on the couch, pale and drained, but conscious. "Status," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Integration appears successful, Doctor," Kaela reported, relief making her own voice tremble slightly. "The link, it seems stable." Minimal feedback detected on the cub's telemetry. She reached out instinctively, placing a paw gently on his shoulder. "You did it, Jack." It was the first time she had used his given name. He managed a weak smile. "We did it." Kaela, his eyes met hers, holding a new depth of understanding, of shared experience. The recovery period was long and arduous for Jack. His body had undergone a profound transformation. He experienced strange sensory inputs, fleeting impressions he described as echoes from the cubs, flashes of instinct, primal urges, a sense of their spatial awareness within the habitat. The integrated Lunari DNA subtly altered his physiology in ways that were still unfolding. Yet, the core purpose of the procedure seemed successful. When Kaela administered the first batch of counteragents harvested from Jack's blood to the cubs, the residual pathogen markers in their systems plummeted dramatically. The dynamic defense was working. Jack's own modified immune system was analyzing the pathogen via the subtle link and generating precisely targeted neutralizing agents. During his convalescence, Kaela became his primary caregiver. They spent hours talking, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Kaela spoke of her Kithan upbringing, the deep connection her people felt to the natural world, the sorrow of witnessing so much loss across the galaxy. Jack, in turn, opened up about his controversial past, the pressures and temptations of cutting-edge science, the incident that had led to his marginalization, an unauthorized experiment aimed at saving another species, which had unforeseen, though ultimately non-lethal, consequences. He expressed remorse, not for his intentions, but for his youthful arrogance in bypassing ethical protocols. In this space of vulnerability and shared purpose, the connection that had sparked during the procedure deepened into something more profound. Scientific collaboration seamlessly blended with emotional intimacy. They found solace and understanding in each other's company, bridging the vast gulf between their species and backgrounds. A quiet romance began to bloom amidst the test tubes and telemetry screens, tentative smiles turning into shared laughter, professional respect evolving into deep affection. The genetic bond Jack had forged with the cubs was mirrored by an equally powerful emotional bond forming between him and Kaela. They were partners now, in science and in heart, united in their mission to protect the Lunari, their lives, unexpectedly, irrevocably intertwined. The success of Jack's radical procedure ushered in a period of unprecedented stability and discovery within the sanctuary. With the pathogen effectively neutralized by the dynamic counteragents derived from Jack's own evolving biology, the Lunari cubs didn't just survive, they began to truly flourish, exceeding all projections for their development. Freed from the constant drain of the synthetic plague, their unique genetics, perhaps catalyzed by the stress of the attack and the introduction of Jack's modified sequences, began to express latent abilities that astonished both Kaela and Jack. It started subtly. Whisper, always the stealthiest, seemed to vanish entirely at times, her fur momentarily taking on the exact texture and color of the rocks she hid amongst, a form of active, adaptive camouflage far beyond simple coloration changes. Then Cinder, during a particularly boisterous bout of play, accidentally delivered a mild jolt of static electricity to Boulder, making the larger cub yelp and jump back. Initially dismissed as freak occurrences, the incidents became more frequent, more pronounced. Boulder learned to emit low-frequency vibrations through the ground, seemingly to communicate or express agitation. One of the quieter cubs, Shade, demonstrated an ability to manipulate localized light fields, creating pockets of near-total darkness around herself. And Rosie, once the frailest, now seemed to possess an unusual empathic sense, often anticipating Kaela's or Jack's needs or moods before they were overtly expressed, and exhibiting an uncanny knack for calming her siblings. Jack, fascinated, began intensive, non-invasive studies, utilizing remote sensors and advanced imaging techniques. "It's incredible, Kaela," he explained, showing her complex energy readings overlaid on footage of Cinder discharging a controlled bioelectric pulse towards a target drone. Their modified mitochondrial function, combined with inherent Lunari neurogenic potential, is unlocking abilities dormant in their ancestral line, possibly enhanced or accelerated by the specific extremophile and human DNA segments introduced in the initial treatment. They're not just recovering, they're evolving, adapting to their environment, and perhaps to the lingering echoes of the threat they faced. Kaela watched in awe as Whisper flowed across the enclosure, her form shimmering and blending seamlessly with the artificial foliage. They're becoming something new, something their ancestors might only have dreamed of. The implications were staggering. The Lunari weren't just saved. They were potentially becoming a species equipped with abilities that could ensure their survival in a challenging galaxy. Their wonder, however, was tempered by the lingering question of the attack's origin. Who had created such a sophisticated pathogen, and why target the last remnants of a forgotten species? While Jack focused on understanding the cub's burgeoning powers, Kaela dedicated herself to forensic analysis of the recovered pathogen fragments and tracing the faint digital signature left by the intruder's infiltration tools. The work was painstaking, like assembling a puzzle from microscopic shards. She cross-referenced synthetic biological markers with databases of known corporate and military research, sifted through encrypted communication logs intercepted by sanctuary sensors during the breach, and analyzed the unique energy signature of the cutting tool used on the ventilation shaft. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. The nanite construction bore hallmarks of proprietary technology linked to several cutting-edge biotech firms. But one name kept surfacing in fragmented data packets and subsidiary shell corporations: Generis Corp. Generis was a behemoth in the galactic biotech industry, known for its aggressive expansion, ethically dubious research in xenogenetics, and rumors of developing biological weapons under deep cover. Generis, Jack murmured, his expression darkening when Kaela presented her findings. It makes a horrible kind of sense. They've always pushed the boundaries, prioritizing profit and technological dominance over ethics. But why the Lunari? The final piece clicked into place when Kaela managed to partially decrypt a personnel file linked to the specific nanite designator codes. The lead researcher credited on the project overview document, dated just prior to the attack, was the name Jack recognized instantly. A name that made his blood run cold: Dr. Vora Lane. Kaela saw the shock and dawning horror on Jack's face. "You know her." Jack nodded slowly, a muscle tightening in his jaw. "Vora. She was my colleague. Years ago. Brilliant, ambitious, ruthless. We worked on some early gene therapy projects together. We had a falling out, a serious one, over ethical disagreements regarding the weaponization potential of some of our research. I left the project." She stayed, climbed the corporate ladder. He looked at Kaela, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and regret. She eventually joined Generis, heading their special projects division. She knew about my work with endangered species, knew about the Lunari project through council briefings. She always resented my successes, especially after my methods became controversial. She saw me as a rival, maybe even a threat to her own ambitions. The motive became terrifyingly clear. It wasn't just about the Lunari's potential genetics. Though Generis undoubtedly saw value there, it was personal. Vora Lane, driven by corporate ambition and personal animosity towards Jack, had likely orchestrated the attack not just to potentially acquire unique genetic material or test a new bioweapon, but to sabotage Jack's potential involvement, to destroy something he might be called upon to save, thereby eliminating a rival and demonstrating Generis's power. The pathogen wasn't just cruel, it was targeted vengeance wrapped in corporate espionage. She knew the council would likely call me if the Lunari were threatened. Jack deduced, pacing the lab. She designed the pathogen to be complex enough to require my specific expertise, perhaps even anticipating I might use radical methods. Maybe she hoped I'd fail, discrediting me permanently. Or perhaps she wanted the evolved cubs for herself, for Generis. The thought that the cubs' newfound abilities might make them even more valuable targets sent a fresh wave of alarm through both of them. Just as the full implication of Vora Lane's involvement and Genaris Corp's sinister interest settled upon them. A klaxon, loud and urgent this time, blared through the sanctuary. Multiple proximity alerts flashed on the main console. Multiple craft detected, Kaela reported, her voice taut accessing external sensors. Fast approach, low altitude. No identification transponders. They're not council ships. Jack rushed to her side, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Several sleek, dark vessels were descending rapidly towards the sanctuary dome, ignoring automated hailing frequencies. Energy signatures consistent with weapon systems flared online. Mercenaries, Jack breathed, recognizing the ship profiles often favored by corporate enforcement wings. Generis. Vora didn't just want to sabotage, she wants the cubs now, especially if she suspects they've changed. The fight wasn't over. It was just entering a new, more violent phase. The invisible threat of the pathogen had been replaced by the overt menace of armed invaders, led by someone who knew Jack, knew the sanctuary's likely defenses, and now coveted the unique, empowered creatures within. Kaela sealed the internal blast doors again, her hand hovering over the defense grid activation. She met Jack's determined gaze. Their brief period of peace was shattered. They had saved the Lunari from extinction by disease, only to face the threat of capture or extermination by force. The assault began with brutal efficiency. Explosive charges breached the outer dome sections, momentarily overloading the energy shields. Power fluctuated wildly as emergency systems kicked in. Through the rents in the superstructure, sleek, armored figures rappelled down, landing silently on the sanctuary's upper levels, their movements professional and coordinated. Helmeted visors scanned the surroundings, pulse rifles held at the ready. They're bypassing the main access points, Kaela reported, tracking their heat signatures on the internal sensors, heading for the habitat control nexus and the lab. They know the layout. Vora. Jack gritted out, grabbing a heavy-duty tranquilizer rifle designed for large fauna, the closest thing to a weapon the sanctuary possessed besides its external defenses. She'd have the schematics. He looked at Kaela, his expression grim but resolute. We need to protect the cubs. Kaela, at all costs. Kaela nodded, her teeth and agility coiled and ready. She activated internal security measures, emergency bulkheads, localized energy fields and corridors, attempting to slow the invaders' progress. The main habitat is sealed, but they'll breach it eventually. We need to hold them off. Suddenly, a calm, feminine voice echoed through the sanctuary's internal address system, overriding Kaela's control. Dr. Arden. Ranger, Kaela. This is Dr. Vora Lane of Generis Corporation. Your unsanctioned activities here are concluded. Cooperate, and perhaps the Galactic Council will show leniency regarding your illegal genetic manipulations. Resist. And my security team is authorized to use lethal force. We are here to secure Generis assets. The voice was cool, controlled, utterly devoid of emotion. Assets. Jack spat the word like poison. She thinks she owns them. The mercenaries blasted through the first set of internal bulkheads with shaped charges. Their advance was relentless. Kaela and Jack fell back towards the lab, which offered a more defensible position adjacent to the habitat's main observation level. As they retreated, Kaela caught movement on the habitat monitors. The cubs weren't cowering. They were reacting. Cinder and Boulder stood near the main habitat door, low growls rumbling in their chests. Whisper was nowhere to be seen, presumably camouflaged somewhere within the enclosure. The other cubs clustered behind the larger pair, their small forms radiating an unusual tension. They seemed to understand the threat. Their evolving senses, picking up on the violence unfolding just outside their sealed environment. More astonishingly, they seemed to be coordinating. Boulder stomped a paw, sending a low vibration through the floor, and Cinder responded with a flick of his ears, glancing towards a ventilation grate. "They know," Kaela breathed, amazed. They sensed the danger. There, preparing. The lab door exploded inwards, and two armored mercenaries stormed in, rifles leveled. Kaela reacted instantly, leaping sideways, her claws flashing as she disabled one attacker with a precise strike to a vulnerable joint in his armor. Or, Jack fired the tranquilizer rifle, the heavy dart hitting the second mercenary squarely in the chest. The man staggered, fired a wild burst from his pulse rifle that scorched the ceiling, then collapsed, unconscious. More footsteps echoed down the corridor. "They're coming," Jack warned, reloading the tranquilizer rifle. "We can't hold them here for long." Just then, a section of the reinforced observation window overlooking the habitat shattered inwards, not from an external attack, but from an internal force. Cinder stood there, crackling with faint bioelectricity, having apparently focused a pulse to break the transparisteel. Boulder followed him through the opening, letting out a challenging roar that echoed through the lab. The other cubs, including a now visible Whisper, shimmered into view behind them, their eyes fixed on the mercenary team advancing down the corridor. "No!" Kaela cried, fearing for their safety. "Get back!" But the cubs ignored her, acting with an intelligence that stunned both Kaela and Jack. They moved into defensive positions, Whisper blended against the bank of equipment, becoming nearly invisible. Cinder crackled with energy, small arcs of lightning playing across his fur. Boulder braced himself, emitting a low, gut-rumbling growl. Shade manipulated the light, plunging the entrance to the lab into disorienting shadow. The lead mercenaries hesitated, momentarily confused by the unexpected appearance of the assets and their bizarre abilities. That hesitation cost them. Cinder unleashed a focused bioelectric pulse, striking the lead mercenary's rifle, causing it to overload and discharge harmlessly. Simultaneously, Boulder charged, not attacking directly, but slamming his body against a heavy equipment rack, sending it toppling towards the invaders, blocking their path. Whisper darted from her concealed position, a silent gray blur, snatching a dropped sidearm before vanishing back into the shadows. Voralane's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and angry now. "Incompetence. Neutralize the animals. Use stun grenades." A mercenary lobbed a grenade towards the cubs. Before it could detonate, Rosie, the smallest cub, let out a high-pitched, piercing cry. The sound seemed to resonate strangely with the grenade's electronics, and it fizzled, hitting the floor inertly. Kaela and Jack stared, dumbfounded. The cubs weren't just exhibiting powers, they were demonstrating sentience, tactical awareness, and coordinated defense. They were fighting back, protecting their home, protecting them. Galvanized by the cubs' courage, Kaela and Jack re-engaged. Kaela using her speed and claws to disarm and incapacitate mercenaries who got too close. Jack providing covering fire with the tranquilizer rifle. The lab became a chaotic battleground, flashes of energy pulses, shimmering camouflage, tactical maneuvers by human, Keithan, and Lunari alike, all fighting against the armored tide of generous forces. Voralane herself appeared at the breached doorway, flanked by two heavily armed guards, her face contorted in fury behind a clear blast shield. "Arden, you enhanced them, illegally. They belong to Generis now." She raised a heavy energy pistol. Before she could fire, multiple things happened at once. Powerful external floodlights illuminated the breached dome sections from outside. The distinct sound of heavy ship engines roared overhead. Through the sanctuary's comm system, a new voice boomed, crisp and authoritative. Generis vessel. Cease hostilities immediately. This is Captain Eva Rostova of the Galactic Conservation Council Patrol Ship Vigilance. You are in violation of sanctuary treaties and interstellar law. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Red and blue lights flashed through the openings in the dome. GCC security forces, heavily armed and armored, began rappelling into the sanctuary, quickly surrounding the remaining Generis mercenaries. Vora Lane looked momentarily stunned, then snarled in frustration, realizing she was outmatched and trapped. Seeing the overwhelming force, her remaining mercenaries lowered their weapons, hands raised. Vora, however, made one last desperate move. She aimed her pistol not at Kaela or Jack, but at Rosie, who stood protectively near Jack's legs. Before she could fire, Whisper, appearing as if from nowhere, launched herself at Vora, sinking small, sharp teeth into the arm holding the pistol. Vora cried out in pain and surprise, dropping the weapon as GCC officers surged forward, tackling and restraining her. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of comms and the low hum of the GCC ships hovering above. Kaela rushed to the cubs, checking them for injuries, relief flooding through her as she found them shaken but unharmed. Jack knelt beside Rosie, gently stroking her fur, his eyes meeting Kaela's in a look of shared exhaustion, disbelief, and profound gratitude. The GCC officers efficiently secured the subdued mercenaries and the spitting, furious Vora Lane. Captain Rostova, a stern-faced woman with silver hair, approached Kaela and Jack, her expression softening slightly as she took in the scene, the damage, the tranquilized mercenaries, the defiant cubs standing beside their guardians. Ranger Kaela, Dr. Arden, she said, her voice firm but respectful. It appears we arrived just in time. We intercepted encrypted communications indicating a Generis Black Ops team targeting this facility. Your emergency beacon, triggered during the initial assault, confirmed their hostile intent. She glanced towards the cubs, who watched the uniformed newcomers with wary intelligence. And it seems the subjects of your work are more capable than our reports indicated. The battle was over. The sanctuary, though damaged, was secure. The immediate threat had been neutralized. Thanks to the timely arrival of the GCC and the unexpected, astonishing intervention of the Lunari cubs themselves, in the aftermath of the Generis assault, the sanctuary buzzed with activity, but of a different kind. GCC engineers worked diligently to repair the damaged dome and systems, while investigators collected evidence and testimony, documenting Generis Corp's illegal actions and Vora Lane's personal vendetta. Vora and her captured mercenaries were taken into custody aboard the Vigilance, destined to face charges before an interstellar tribunal. The repercussions for Generis Corp promised to be severe, shaking the foundations of the powerful biotech giant. Amidst the official proceedings, Kaela and Jack focused on restoring normalcy to the habitat and tending to the cubs. The young Lunari, remarkably resilient, quickly recovered from the stress of the battle. Their actions during the fight had irrevocably proven their sentience and their extraordinary abilities. They were no longer just subjects of conservation. They were recognized as intelligent beings, unique products of survival, science, and unforeseen evolution. The bond between the cubs and their two guardians, forged through shared adversity and Jack's literal lifelink, had deepened into one of mutual trust and affection. The cubs now interacted with Kaela and Jack with an understanding that transcended species barriers, communicating through a combination of vocalizations, subtle gestures, and the empathic connection Rosie seemed to share, particularly with Jack. Prefect Lear and other high-ranking officials from the Galactic Conservation Council arrived at the sanctuary once the situation was fully secured. They surveyed the scene, listened intently to Kaela's and Jack's reports, reviewed the data logs documenting the pathogen, the treatments, the cub's evolution, and the Generies' attack. There were lengthy discussions about the ethical implications of Jack's methods, particularly the permanent genetic bonding. However, the undeniable success in saving the Lunari, the cubs demonstrated sentience and stability, and the clear evidence of Generis's criminal actions weighed heavily in their favor. Finally, Prefect Leor addressed Kaela and Jack directly, his multifaceted eyes holding a mixture of gravity and respect. Ranger Kaela, Dr. Arden, what you have accomplished here is unprecedented. You faced a sophisticated biological attack orchestrated by a ruthless corporation, and you not only saved the last 8 Lunari stalkers, but presided over an evolutionary event of profound significance. He paused, looking towards the habitat where the cubs now rested peacefully. Dr. Arden, your methods were unorthodox, perhaps even bordering on violations of certain interspecies genetic protocols. However, the Council recognizes the extraordinary circumstances and the undeniable results. Your sacrifice, he nodded towards Jack, acknowledging the permanent changes he had undergone, and your dedication, alongside Ranger Kaela's unwavering guardianship, have preserved a species and potentially created something entirely new. Lear continued. Generis Corporation will face the full force of interstellar law. Their assets related to illegal bioweaponry and genetic exploitation will be seized. As for the Lunari, they clearly require specialized care and understanding. Therefore, the Galactic Conservation Council officially grants permanent joint guardianship of the Lunari stalkers and lifetime funding for the continued operation and security of this sanctuary. To both Ranger Kaela and Dr. Jack Arden, he offered a rare, slight smile. You have proven yourselves not just protectors, but partners to these remarkable creatures. Their future, it seems, is intrinsically linked with yours. A profound sense of relief and quiet joy washed over Kaela and Jack. The uncertainty that had clouded their future, the fear of repercussions, lifted. They had official sanction, support, and the confirmation that their life's work could continue. Together, they looked at each other, a deep, unspoken understanding passing between them. Their journey had started with distrust and desperation, traversed through radical science and violent conflict, and culminated in an unexpected fusion of species, science, and heart. Later, as the GCC officials departed and the quiet rhythm of the sanctuary began to reassert itself under the soft lavender glow of Ethelgard's veil, Kaela and Jack stood on the observation platform, watching the cubs. Cinder practiced generating small, contained sparks between his paws. Whisper flowed like liquid shadow through the artificial twilight. Rosie sat near the viewport, seemingly watching Kaela and Jack with intelligent, dark eyes. Jack reached out, taking Kaela's paw gently in his hand. The contact was warm, natural, a symbol of the bridge they had built between their worlds. A new beginning, Jack murmured, his voice filled with quiet hope. The faint empathic echo he constantly perceived from the cubs felt calm, content. Kaela leaned her head against his shoulder, her russet fur soft against his practical clothing. More than just survival, she agreed, her own heart full. Life finds a way, Jack, sometimes, in the most unexpected forms. They stood together in the peaceful silence, Two vastly different individuals united by an extraordinary circumstance, bound by science, affection, and a shared responsibility for the unique lives thriving before them. The genetic bond Jack shared with the cubs was a tangible link, a testament to sacrifice and innovation. But the bond between Kaela and Jack, forged in the face of extinction and solidified through trust and love, represented something equally profound: the hope that compassion could bridge any divide, that cooperation could overcome adversity, and that even in the vast, often indifferent expanse of the galaxy, life, in all its wondrous forms, could not only endure, but evolve towards a brighter, shared future. The sanctuary on Ethelgard's Vale was no longer just a refuge for the last of a dying species. It was a cradle for a new era of interspecies understanding and a testament to the enduring power of devotion.